Today we're going to cut apart this pair of White's Perry Moc Toe boots to see if they're still worth it after 1,000-ish miles of wear, and we're going to leave its fate up to the wheel of death. And don't forget, we just released the Mocktober themed wallets, two-toning, and Mocktober shirts still available, so check those out. They just help support the channel, allow us to do some of these more ridiculous stuff like the Wheel of Death and guillotines and stuff, so I'll put a link in the description. Now let's go over the boot information. So the brand is White's, the style is the Perry Moc, the color is the distressed brown, but they now have black and red dog. They weigh 1 pound 14 ounces. They retail for $269 and they're made in the United States. Now let's go over the information we can gather about this boot before we cut it in half. And we're just gonna go over the condition of this boot instead of going through every single detail, because we've already done that in the full brand new pair cut in half we did last year. So be sure to check that out after this video if you want more information. But let's start with the leather. So the leather looks like it's in pretty decent condition, especially for how much this boot has been used and what this boot has been used for. Because this is clearly a work boot that someone was doing some sort of construction or some sort of manual labor work in. And these boots have been resoled at least once, because if you look at the condition of the outsole compared to how much the upper is broken in and how much worse condition it is than the outsole. So that in and of itself kind of speaks for the quality of the upper, that it at least made it to one resole, and it has a lot of life left in it. You could probably get at least one more resole out of this boot. And there are some surface cracks and splitting in the leather, but none of them go all the way through. And this, you see this a lot in work boots, because those little teeny particles of dirt and concrete work their way into the leather and clog it all up and eventually start working almost like an abrasive to break down that leather. So that's why in work boots you see this type of splitting. And there are ways to prevent it. All you gotta do is clean and condition your boots, but most guys that are wanting a work boot aren't really looking to take care of their boots as much as someone that's wearing them for more style. And there is a pretty big cut in this leather right here. And because this is a 3.2 millimeter thick leather, it didn't cut all the way through. And that's why a lot of people prefer a thicker leather for work, because if this was the Danners or Thursdays with a 2 millimeter thick leather, that probably would have gone all the way through and your boots are shot, or it could have potentially cut you, you know. So right off the bat, leather, super impressive. Next to the construction, so this is a Goodyear welted boot with a leather welt, and I don't even think they had to resole the welt on when they resoled these, because if you look at the toe, it's starting to get pretty beat up right there, and it doesn't look like that was refreshed. And a big part of the reason of why they didn't have to do a whole lot of work in resoling these is the same thing we saw with Thursdays. All the cobbler has to do is peel this old outsole off and glue a new one on, and none of the stitching has to come undone. So that makes them really easy to resole and cheap to resole, but the only problem is sometimes these wedge soles are prone to splitting, and there was some issues in the initial run of these boots of the outsole coming off just at the toe. So that's why in the Carolinas you see that stitch goes all the way through. Outsole is stitched on at the front of the boot to prevent that. So it's kind of a trade-off either way if you're looking for a really easy and cheap boot to resole, or more longevity and security with your outsole. And speaking of the outsole, this is a Vibram Christie outsole. It's a rubber-based outsole rather than the Miramec polyurethane outsole that was on the initial one that I cut in half. And they've since changed their stock boots to come with the Vibram, and I'm not sure exactly why they did that. Maybe it bonds better to this rubber midsole. I'm not fully sure. But the one question I have is, where's the shank now? Is there still a shank in it? Because the previous version had the shank built into the actual outsole itself. So I'm curious to see once we get this cut in half. And then as for the overall condition of these boots, there's still a lot of life left in these boots. They should last at least through this outsole and probably another one. So you get at least 3 soles on these boots, at least if you're wearing them like this guy's wearing them. The only thing that could be repaired and needs to be repaired is right here at the mock toe. This mock toe stitching has come undone, or it's worn through. It's probably because of all that buildup, because it's right at that flex point where that grit's gonna slowly wear through that thread. But the nice thing is, being a mock toe, you just gotta get some heavy thread and a needle, and you can sew this up yourself in almost like a saddle stitching way. So now I'm really interested to see what the condition of the inside of this boot is. How has that cardboard counter lasted? Where's the shank? The only way to do that is by spinning the wheel of death. And each video we do one of these 1,000-mile boots, we add a new portion to the pie that you guys choose by the comment section. So let me know what cutting apparatus you want me to add. The most liked comment will add to the next video. So let's spin the wheel of death.
Got it.
Well, we found the shank, but we didn't get all the way through, so I took the other pair for a cleaner cut, did it on the bandsaw. So let's see what's inside. So that is not the cardboard counter that I was expecting to see. So I reached out to White's to figure out if they had changed the counter material to leather like this one. And they let me know that this was probably one of the really early Perry Moc Toes that they made when they still were trying the leather counter. So unfortunately, we're not gonna be able to see how the cardboard counter lasted or the fiberboard counter lasted. So I'm hoping that they eventually move towards these leather counters for the reasons we talked about in the Thursday video last time, because they just hold up a lot better. But a lot of interesting things on the inside. Look how shined the inside of this boot is. You know, this lining used to be the rough out suede texture leather, and it's completely flattened out, almost like a wax flesh now. And all of this, there's a literal shine at the heel. And there's also a little bit of mold in this boot, you can see right there. So that's why you want to make sure your boots are all the way dry. And a lot of times people get 2 pairs of boots to rotate between, so you don't get constant moisture in there building up and developing mold. And the other thing I really liked is I love how these leather lasting boards really shape to the shape of your foot. You can see a very clear footprint of where the guy's foot that was wearing these sat. And you don't get that with fiberboard, because fiberboard it's not as thick and it doesn't compress as much. And you do get some of that compression because of the cork underneath. Just like this boot, you can see that cork is smashed almost a millimeter thick. But it hasn't really shifted or clumped up in any way. I think that's totally fine, because there's not a lot of cork in this boot to begin with. And now we can really see where that shank destroyed the chain on the chainsaw. Right there underneath the cork. So, and it's a pretty long shank actually. It runs from there to there. So it's a nice heavy duty shank, and if you're getting this for a work boot, it's necessary to have a shank. So to me, it's a pretty good value. And the way I came to that conclusion is comparing it to the closest mock toe, which is a Thorogood, for $250. It's also made in the United States. So for $20 more in the Perry's, you get the leather welt, you get the leather lasting board, and you get a thicker, more heavy duty leather upper. But that doesn't always mean a better value for each person, because some people might value the almost zero break-in period of the Thorogoods, the comfort of the Thorogoods, and the slightly lower price of the Thorogoods. So comparing the two and cutting a worn-out version in half really tells me that these boots are still worth it after 1,000 miles, because this has they had at least another resole in them. So let me know what you guys think, and if you own a pair of these, what your personal experience is with them. And don't forget to vote for the next portion of the pie for the Wheel of Death. And Mocktober rolls on. So thank you guys for watching. See ya.